People just, I'm a total slob when I eat, so I totally feel that.
Oh, yeah. He was high.
Let me go see if there is anybody outside real quick.
I know, making sure this time.
I should have brought my camera holder.
Yeah, I have one. It's at my house, so.
Yeah, I have a mini tripod. All right, cool.
Please, Dad, Kim.
Oh, thank you.
Well, we got toilet tissue.
I looked up on it.
Yeah, I don't retain it, so
I'm like a kid. I got my shirt.
Oh, that's my grandson for sure. How many apple ciders do we have in there?
I kind of think
You can save that. You can save that flavor. Save that flavor for later.
Exactly.
We haven't been able to find the thermostat yet, so.
Well, they turned off the AC. The AC was on.
So we turned it off. So that might help.
Good. Glad to hear
I'm
it.
surprised that National Grid raised their rates as of today, right? I'm surprised they turned it on at all. I'm
I try
surprised
not
they
to pay
didn't-
attention to that stuff because I get like so,
Yeah, they
it's
You're
just
gonna see it
crazy.
in your
announced
bill.
it today.
So.
Well, I told them I bought oil the other day.
Yeah.
Right after I bought my oil, I went on Amazon, bought myself an electric blanket. The first time I've ever had one.
They're nice though. They're so comfy. Until you have to get up from it and then you're
warm,
freezing. Yeah. My aunt has a heated mattress.
My dogs don't like them. The dogs don't
You
like
cold?
them.
That cold, huh? You
Yeah.
saw your shirt on the floor?
Oh, did it fall? I don't
Good
know.
morning, guys. Thank you so much for coming to the meeting. First off, I want to apologize, right? So the last few meetings have been a little emotion-filled, I think, right? So there's obviously a lot going on. Ladies, if you don't mind, please. So I apologize. I sometimes let things go a little bit longer than I probably should have. And I know everybody wants to hear both sides. For me, having been here for 14 years, we have always been a place of kindness and respect for each other. And having conversation and open dialogue, it's something I've kind of feel passionate about. So it was a little disheartening the last couple of meetings, the way people kind of went at each other. That's not who and how we are down here. So going forward, we are gonna have respectful meetings. We're gonna listen to both sides, right? We have a guest speaker here today, Joe. He's here to just explain a little bit about the union, what it is, how it works, how it comes to be, what the process is, what the role is. It's simply information, right? That's all it is. Unbiased, straight up facts from somebody who knows. Everybody knows that Kayla is a spokesperson for the union side. So if you have any questions, concerns, anything of that nature at all, Kayla would be the one to go to. Kayla and I have a great working relationship. We have for many years, and we are going to continue that together. So I just want everybody to know this is not an adversarial thing between us and between all of you. So Kayla and I have talked. We're going to make sure that everybody is heard. We're going to be respectful, let each person speak so everybody can hear what's going on. If you have a question, if you have a concern, simply raise your hand, okay? And then we want to make sure that everybody's heard. I don't want anybody to walk away feeling like that was a waste of time. Why did I even bother? Nobody listened to me. I didn't get my questions answered. You know, people are coming to me after the meetings. This is the time to do it. You might have a question that somebody else wants the answer to as well. And I want to make sure that those questions get asked and that you all walk away feeling like you were heard and understood and that your questions were answered. So going forward, that's we're going to start holding these meetings, and that's how it's going to go forward. Kayla and I already talked. We're on the same page. Okay? Everybody good? I appreciate it. This is Joe. I will let him take over as well. Going forward, let him introduce himself.
Take over.
You can take over.
Good morning, thank you. Thank you for coming. I know they made you come, but thank you anyway. I appreciate the time that you spend here. I'll be respectful of it, get through the information as quickly as possible, answer any questions you may have at the end, and generally try to put you in a position where you make a good decision for yourselves. This is a business decision that you make. A lot of people will lobby you to have you see it their way. The company will, of course, try to get you to not support the union. The union will try to get you to support the union. Both make business decisions to do that, right? It's kind of about money for both of them. And at the end of the day, when you get your information, I hope that you'll make a good business decision, whatever that is. If you think that this is something that's a good idea for you, you should do it. And if you don't, you shouldn't, right? So this is yours. It is a business decision. Make that purchase if it's a good one for you. But try if you can, and this is the hardest part of this, to stay out of the emotion and the rhetoric of it. Campaigns, these type of campaigns get much like the political campaigns that we're in the middle of that never seem to end, right? People will spread hate to the other side. Don't pick one side over the other. Both sides tend to do it. Try to stay out of that. Don't vote against somebody. If the union can help you, you'll vote for them. And if you don't think they can, you'll vote against them. But during this process, people will try to tug on your emotions. This is a business decision at heart. And make a good one, whatever it is. Some of you may recognize me. I've been fortunate enough to address this group before, maybe before you were here. But every year I worked with John. I'm still in touch with John on a semi-regular basis, if you can ever stay in touch with John, if you can catch him wherever he's going. And I had the pleasure, some of you I recognize from being here in the past. And if you remember me, you'll see that I don't take a hardline approach to this. If you are for the union, I respect you. And if you're not, I respect you. I do want you to make a good decision. Generally, I really don't care about employers, even though your employer hires me. I want you to have this information. I want it to be accurate, but people will lie to you about this process, and you don't know me. So that's kind of a challenge to you. Check the information and find out if I'm being accurate with you. Because in campaigns, people lie, right? We learned that from some of our presidents that we've had, right? They lie during the campaigns. And at the end of the day, find out who's giving you accurate information and act on accurate information if you can. My background's a union background. I spent much of my life in the Teamsters Union. I grew up in union halls. My father was a labor leader. I was a pretty smart kid. I learned at a very early age that if I went to the union hall with my pop on Sundays, it got me out of church with my mom. So that was my strategy. I would much rather run around a union hall. But just by osmosis, I learned a lot about how unions operated, just by listening to my father give speeches to workers. And when I became old enough to get a job, I joined the Teamsters Union. I was a mechanic. I used to work on trucks and buses. I worked for a little company in Coca-Cola in Philadelphia called Coca-Cola. You may have heard of us. And I joined the Teamsters Union. And I was given my upbringing, I kind of quickly became a shop steward. After working at Coke for about 10 years or so, I went to work for the union as an organizer. I was good enough at it that I moved up the chain and became an officer, and eventually became the president of a large local in Philadelphia. I'm from Philadelphia. If I talk funny, that's why, right? And it's fun to be a Philadelphia fan right now, by the way. But I rose through the ranks. I believed in unions. I believed everybody should be in a union. I was a good advocate for unions. When I became the president of the union, you see the business side of things. And I won't get into the long story short, but I realized that it wasn't necessarily somebody advocating against for you against greedy corporations, but sometimes we were a greedy corporation too. So I left. I provide this education to workers. I don't care what you do. I do care that you get accurate information. And I know it's hard to get from the company, and I know it's going to be hard to get from the union because they both have an axe to grind and a business interest in this. At the end of the day, fair to tell you, I'm paid by your employer. They don't pay me to lie to you. If they did ask me to lie to you, they never have. If they did, I wouldn't come here. And at the end of the day, this is your decision, but again, try to stay out of the rhetoric, if you can. And it's going to be hard, because everybody's going to get you the voting motion. And don't do that. So these books. Anytime I get one chance with a group of employees, I try to go over this book. This is a basic guide to the National Labor Relations Act. So way back in 1935, before there was the National Labor Relations Act, there were unions, but getting into a union back then was somewhat of a violent process. If you wanted to exercise your rights and get represented by a union, the union had to try to force their way into the gates. The company's goons would try to beat them back, and your rights were literally beaten out of you. So Congress acted, they passed the National Labor Relations Act and put in place a formal process for workers who want to join a union. And they put in a process where there's a law that provides for secret ballot elections, and they put all sorts of do's and don'ts for employers so that employees could have a say and have a vote on whether they wanted to join a union. And when they passed this law, they formed a government agency called the National Labor Relations Board. The Labor Board has one job, right? They're a government agency, and their job is to enforce this law. And they do a pretty good job of it. Employers generally think the Labor Board is all about the union, and unions think the Labor Board is too pro-company. So that means that they're probably doing a pretty good job. The Labor Board does swing left and right with the administration, sort of, but they generally do a pretty good job of enforcing this law. This is a book that's published by the National Labor Relations Board. They're like the referee in this process. So if you want to find out who's giving you accurate information, this is a good source for you. It's a neutral source. It's not written by employer groups. It's not written by unions. This is written by the people who will run your election, the Labor Board. And if I tell you information that you believe is inaccurate, or the union does, this is a good reference for you. And in fact, if you want to check anything anybody tells you, the very back of this book has name and number for all of the regional offices of the Labor Board. You can call any one of these numbers. You are in Region 1 in Boston, but you could call any one of these numbers, and if you have a question about anything involved in this, you can call and ask to speak to a board agent. They generally do a pretty good job of answering questions. They try hard. They don't have an axe to grind, and they'll give you a good answer to your question. And if they don't know it, because they're human beings and they don't know all this, they'll put you in touch with somebody that can. So that's what this is. Some of the slides will have page numbers correlating to this, and this is where I get a lot of the information that you're going to see up on the screen. If you do call the Labor Board, it is a government agency. Let the phone ring. They're government workers. Sometimes they take their time, but they'll do their best to answer your question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how much do I'll say the laws and this change? Because I noticed this book was printed in 1997.
It hasn't.
So I'm wondering how much might have changed between then and now.
The only change that ever happened to it was a Taft-Hartley amendment that happened in the 40s. So these laws, while different boards different courts will rule differently, the wording hasn't changed since 1947. They'll interpret it differently, different judges, but the law has remained unchanged, and the only amendment has been that Taft-Hartley. So you can trust, and if you have questions again that you don't feel like you can trust your employer, or the union, or me, you can call the Labor Board and ask for it. Okay?
Or you can go to the
So
website.
the first thing I want to show you is in Section 7. And my favorite slide, what are your rights in this process? Section 7 says that if you think this is a good idea, that you join a union, you have a protected right to speak up in favor of the union. You have a right to lobby for a union. You have a right to try to get your coworkers to sign authorization cards or try to get them to vote. You have a right to pass out literature. You have a right to do that all with no fear of reprisal from your employer.
Really?
Your employer cannot discipline you legally for your support of a union, and if they do discipline you for your support of a union, the Labor Board remains your advocate and you can file charges against your employer at the Labor Board, and if they agree with you that you've been illegally disciplined, they'll represent you and they'll do it for free. So you have a right to support a union without fear of reprisal. Conversely, if you do your research and come to the conclusion that this is not a good idea, and you don't think you need a union to represent you, and you can speak for yourself if that's you, you have a right to not support a union and be vocal, every bit as vocal as someone who is supporting a union. You have a right to not support a union, and you can hand out your own literature and tell people don't sign a card and don't vote for the union. Those are your rights, they're equal. If you think that a union is a good idea, I respect you, advocate for your rights. If you don't think that this is a good idea, then don't let a bad thing happen in your workplace. If you think this is not right for you, don't be afraid to speak up. Be respectful, right? Don't get into fights over this, it's not worth it, trust me. But don't be afraid to speak up, and don't just sit back and let a bad thing happen if you think it's a bad thing. Those are your rights, and it works both ways. So the process, let's talk about the process to get in. It's a 3-step process. Each step gets progressively more difficult for the union. I'll go over the 3 steps, we'll talk about it, we'll answer your questions, and we'll get you out of here. The first step is the union proving to the labor board that there is sufficient evidence here to have a vote. Step 1 has basically happened here, and the labor laws say that the labor board doesn't want to just come down here and run an election because a couple people called and said we need a union. The labor board wants to know if you have sufficient support to have a vote, and that's 30%. So to prove to the labor board that there is 30% support here, the union asks you to sign an authorization card. And this is a card that they use and they give to labor board saying that basically you want to join the union, you support the union, and if they come to the conclusion that 30% of you have signed an authorization card, they will then sponsor an election. And that's apparently what's happened here. Unions generally don't file with 30%. They usually file with much more, because sometimes in campaigns they lose some support. But 30% gets them to vote. And that's step 1, and apparently that hurdle has passed. And they will then move on to step 2. Step 2 is a voting process. All of this is, yeah.
Isn't it true that they can voluntarily recognize the union? The employer can voluntarily recognize
The union can voluntarily recognize the employer. They generally don't.
Why not?
It's because the employer, quite frankly, doesn't want a union.
Oh.
So if they wanted a union,
But
listen, if the union was good, we can all agree that the union is not good for the employer and they don't want it. If the union was good for the employer, they would make you join. Right? They'd have cards signed, they'd ask you to sign the cards, they'd recognize the union, and you'd all be in the union. Employers, there's nothing good in this for the employer. But that doesn't matter. The question is it good for you?
Right, is it good for us?
So
if we
employers
want-
generally
if we
don't
want it-
and if they were to recognize the union would have to have more than 50%.
Right, so if more than 50% of us want it, that doesn't matter to the employer. They just are gonna force the
They're gonna
election
ask,
anyway.
yeah, because a lot of times unions
they
get
don't
cards
care
signed
that we want it.
coercively, they don't know, they don't get to see the cards.
What if we could prove that we didn't sign anything coercively?
They still could say no.
This seems like a coercive thing.
That's fine. I'm sorry you feel that way. So far, I don't think I'm being coercive, but I understand.
I mean, it's subtle.
So I'm going to
You're good
continue,
at
okay? Can I
I'll give
continue?
you that, yeah.
So the voting process is mutually agreed by the union, the labor board, and your employer. And it'll probably be in your workplace. Sometimes they're mail-in ballot elections. Sometimes they are walk-up elections. In recent years, the labor board has deferred to a mail-in ballot election just because they don't want to come into a workplace, and COVID has kind of made that happen. Most, even unions and employers agree that they'd rather have a walk-up. Walk-up elections typically have more of a turnout. I don't think I've seen a walk-up election have less than 90% turnout. People tend to vote more in those. So it is a secret ballot. You can vote your conscience. Nobody will know how you vote. You'll get a ballot that you won't sign. It'll go in a box, very low tech. Nobody can cheat. There won't be any Russian interference in this, right? There won't be any. Florida's not even involved in this. Nobody's going to cheat in this vote. And the outcome won't be what the union wants, and it won't be what the employer wants. It'll be what you want. Only you can vote, and it's your business how you vote, yes or no. And nobody will know, unless you tell them, nobody will know how you vote in this election. You're not obligated to vote yes or no if you signed a card. If you signed a card, you can vote yes or no. If you did not sign a card, you can vote yes or no. So make sure if you do have that, and when that happens, that you participate in this. Nobody can complain about the outcome if most people vote, right? If it's the will of the masses. If only 10 people vote and 6 people vote for the union, everybody would be represented by the board. Okay. So participate. So unions can work very well and sometimes they don't work so well. They tend to work very well in the public sector. Those places that have the great union contracts that you read about are generally places that have been union a long time. But when I joined a union, I got a job with, like I said, Coca-Cola in Philadelphia. They were union for many, many years before I got there. And that's the number one reason people join unions, by the way. They get a job somewhere where there's a union. Most people don't have a vote. They just take a job. And when I took that job, they had a contract. And the decision for me to join a union was, am I going to work for these wages and benefits? Which were already there. They were there for, this place was union for 50 years. Good union job, good wages and benefits. And if I join this company, if I like these wages and benefits, I join the union. It was math. Okay, I know I'm going to pay dues, make the decision, and I take the job. That's about the limit of my decision. It was math. This is not that. Nobody can tell you how this turns out at the end. When a union wins, they go to step 3, collective bargaining. Could be great for you, could be bad for you. Nobody can represent, they'll represent you're going to get more money and better benefits, and the company will suggest you might get less wages and benefits. Nobody knows. Nobody knows how this turns out. So if anybody says you're going to get $1, $2, $5, they're not telling you the truth. What you're voting for in this is the idea of exclusive representation. So this is what the law says, that this decision says. The law says that the union, the majority representative, if they win the power to act as the exclusive bargaining agent for all employees. Individual employees have no separate rights, and they must look exclusively to the union for the protection of your interests. Here's what that means. So today, you work for NRT, and you have what's known as a direct relationship with them. You come to work for them, they pay you. All of your issues, wages, benefits, policy, discipline, any work decisions are made between you and them, right? You take your issues to them, they get back to you or not, and you have that direct relationship. That's how it works here. And that's how it works in most of the private sector. 93.9% of all private sector workplaces are not represented by a union. So today, that's how most workplaces operate. Let me get through the slide and then I'll come back to you. If you choose a union to be your exclusive representative, the law says that this direct relationship is now illegal, and you no longer deal with your employer. And when you have workplace issues with respect to wages, benefits, and working conditions, you join the 6.1% of the private sector that has an exclusive representation process with the union. And you are now represented by the union, and the union takes your issues to the company, and they get back to you. And this direct relationship is cut off because you're now represented by the union. Go ahead.
So the direct relationship, isn't that also called at-will employment?
No, nope. No. Two different things.
Master-servant kind of relationship.
That's your opinion.
I have a question. My husband was part of a union for the state. He was able to go to his supervisor, or in his case, he was a supervisor. They were able to go to him first, and then if it wasn't resolved, they went to the union.
Right,
So you
so-
can still have a relationship with your employer.
Listen, if you can still go to your employer, you can still address your employer. If you like them, you can still deal with them, you can get things done. But the employer is not empowered to make any changes without checking with the union. They're not empowered to resolve grievances without checking with the union, change policy, discipline. Anything that's contractual must go through the union.
Yep.
And sometimes when places are union for a real long time, it gets to be a cozier relationship and things like that happen, but it is against the law. And generally, the union will want to be part of it. So when considering whether you want to be a part of a union, it's fair to consider the things that are broken in your direct relationship. Every workplace has problems, and you always will. So it's fair to consider what's wrong with your workplace when considering joining a union. A union campaign will only focus on the things that are wrong in the workplace. That's just the nature of campaigns. But they're fair for you to consider. But please consider the things that are not wrong in this workplace. And that's a harder conversation, certainly with what you do. God bless you for what you do. And those problems are always going to be there. But consider the things that are right and things that are wrong. right? Before you decide to engage in this relationship. And before you get in too much of the rhetoric, consider who the union is. They are a business. Find out how much the costs are. They have a constitution that outlines when you're a member, your rights as a member, but also your obligations as a member. There are costs. There are rules when you're a member of a union. Make sure you read the Teamsters Constitution and find out if that's something that you're okay with. This should be a document that they should have given you by now, and they probably haven't, but try to get a copy of the union's Constitution. You can Google it, find out if you're okay with it. And again, make this a purchase, and be wary of that whole idea that I'm mad at my employer, I don't think they're treating me right or whatever, and the temptation to vote just against people, right? That'll be strong in this campaign. If this is a purchase that works for you, do it, and if it's not, don't do it. And again, stay out of the rhetoric and be wary of that whole employer is bad. A lot of bad employers in this country, and a lot of workplaces that don't work, that don't have a union that work just fine, and vice versa. So that's all you're voting for. Nobody knows how this turns out. When a union wins, you go to step 3. Step 3 is the hardest part of all of this. Step 3 is when the two sides are going to sit and engage in the collective bargaining process, and they're going to try to get you a contract. The union will, if they win exclusive representation rights, will now have the right to sit with your employer. Your employer will be obligated to sit with the union, and they're going to try to negotiate a contract. And they're going to try to negotiate a contract that gets you more and gets you better wages and benefits. The Teamsters Union, I was part of them. I happen to know if you're working with the organizer named Sean, I don't know if you are, I know him. He's not a bad guy. But the collective bargaining process comes with no guarantees. If you end up getting a contract, and there's a lot of studies on it, we'll talk about it another time. If you end up getting a contract through this process, the only things that are in that contract are what both parties agree to. There is no obligation for the company to agree to something if they don't want it in a contract. So here are the rules of collective bargaining. And you can read this for yourself, and you should, and find out if I'm representing this fairly. Under this negotiation, there are 3 obligations. Both parties are obligated to meet those 3 obligations. 1, they must meet with each other. So the employer and the union are going to meet at reasonable time and place. This process usually takes a good year, right? So they're going to meet with each other, and they're going to discuss your wages and benefits. The union will come in with all kind of proposals for you. You'll like the union's proposals. They're going to try to get you better wages and better benefits. You're going to come in and you're going to say, wow. They're going to ask for $10 more, free health care. They'll ask for parties. They'll ask for cat insurance. They'll ask for whatever you want them to ask for. They'll ask for, and the employer has to consider it. The company's going to come into this negotiation with a whole bunch of proposals that, and this is not their first rodeo, I've seen their proposals, you won't like. They're now looking out for themselves, and you're not their problem. So they're going to cut the best deal that they can. They're going to come in with proposals that are conservative, because they don't know what 3 years and 5 years ahead looks like. And they're going to try to, if they agree to a contract, something that works well for them. And the union must consider the employer's proposals. The 3rd obligation is if they reach agreements on any of those proposals, they stop what they're doing and they write it down. You ever go to bargain for a car? You ever go to a car dealer? Right? We've all done bargaining. You go to the car dealer, you like the F-150, and you say, okay, that's the car I want, and you start bargaining, and you go back and forth, and if you reach a deal, you get the car, right? This is a lot like that. And the problem is one party in this really doesn't want to get a deal, right? There's nothing good in this for the employer. The union has nothing for the employer in collective bargaining, and the employer can say no to everything the union proposes, and they're not violating the law. Collective bargaining is very difficult for the union. If you go into a car dealer and bargain for the F-150, but you don't have any money, you don't have any credit, you don't have a trade-in, you don't have any way to buy the car, it doesn't matter what your intentions are, how good of a negotiator you are, you're not getting the car, right? And the car dealer's not going to bother with you. In this circumstance, the employer has to go to these negotiating sessions. They have to bargain in good faith. but they don't have to agree. And the union doesn't have customers, they don't have money for the employer, they don't have anything the employer wants. In fact, the employer doesn't want a union and they can say no. So if you come to the conclusion that I'm being fair with these facts, then you have to go to the union, go to a meeting and ask them what their plan is. Because they've had a whole bunch of sessions with some of the other groups that have gone union, and so far they haven't gotten too far. Because the employer can say no. And they have at these negotiations. And all these places that joined the union some time ago are still in the bargaining process, and they're not very far along at all.
I think Kayla has a question.
Isn't it true that it's usually mostly the employers that drag out these contract negotiations?
I'd say that's probably true,
Yeah.
Sometimes the union's not ready and they meet their business people too and they're busy.
Right.
But yeah, there's,
So you think that's
first
just
contracts
their,
generally, quite frankly, yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
Employers drag it out, they
Right.
make proposals, they have to bargain in good faith. That's an easy threshold to meet. I don't think it's any secret that an employer doesn't want a union, and if they're ever going to agree to a contract, it generally, first contracts take a long time. They generally
Right.
take about a year or longer. And
Isn't it
if they do
also-
reach an agreement, here's my experience. If they reach an agreement, and here, I'll be as fair as I can, you might end up with a contract that has better wages, better benefits, and better all around, hey, you may get a contract and say, this was a good decision for us, right? That may happen. And if that happens, you'll pay dues to the union, right? That contract might be flat. After give and take of collective bargaining, you might end up with a contract and look at it and say, this kind of looks like what we had before. You know, this is no different than what we had.
Just want to
Let me
clarify.
finish my point.
I just want to clarify.
I will, I promise. So you may look at that and say, okay, you know, this is why I did this, but this is kind of what we always had. And if that's the contract that you end up with, you pay dues to the union. The third possibility is that you look at that contract and there are things missing. Things that you used to have that somehow didn't make it to the contract, and you can end up, and you can shake your head no, but the reality is that this happens a lot. If you end up with a contract that's less wages and less benefits, that can also happen. The union doesn't want that. The union wants to get you more. They're not bad people.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if the only contract that the employer will give them is things that have less in it for you, the union still wins in this process. And that is a business decision that, in my experience, they'll make. It's one of the reasons I got out. This is a business decision that unions make. They are a business. They want to get you more, but please don't think that they'll walk away because they couldn't get you more. If they get you less, they still make the same amount of money as if they were going to get you more.
Yeah.
And that is the business side of the union.
No. Okay, can I clarify? So the Teamsters have informed me, and we can get this in writing, that if it comes to the point where we get a contract where we're not getting more than what we already had, then they can voluntarily let us go. And if there's 50 plus one of us that want to do that, they have it doesn't help them at all to keep us there against our will.
Not
It
true.
gives them bad.
Not true. It absolutely does help them to keep you there against your will. They make money. That's how they make money.
Yes, they
And
can.
in the
And
era
some
of
unions
declining
will do
union
that,
membership,
but not these guys.
In the era of declining union membership,
Yeah,
unions
because
used
of
to
stuff like
represent
this.
over 30% of the
Because
private
of stuff
sector.
like this, because of
They're
these
down-
mandatory union meetings where you sit here, that should be illegal, by the way.
It's not.
It's not yet,
And
but
it
there's
shouldn't
stuff
be.
in Congress that
Please,
is,
I'm going to get through the information.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna get through the information, please. Thank you.
I want
So at the end of the day, union membership that
disgusting.
was once 30% is down to 6%. And my experience with unions is they're not walking away when they can get 50, 60 people, 200 people, 30 people to give them money out of their paycheck. And please don't think that that's why they're not here. They're here to make money.
No,
And if they can get money, they'll try hard for you. Again, they're not bad people. This is not up to them what goes into a contract. It's still up to your employer.
they're not bad
It's
people,
still
but
up to
they
both
use their
parties.
money.
So that's the collective bargaining process. Do the parties have to come to an agreement? No, there's no obligation. Neither party's obligated to make a concession, to agree to any proposal to the other side ever. Nobody's going to make NRT, put them in a headlock, give them a noogie, and say, you must do this. If they do it, it's because they agreed to it voluntarily.
Gotcha.
And if they don't agree to it, you don't get it. And there's no reason for them to do it.
There's no reason for them to do what?
Agree to a contract that they don't want.
Oh, really?
Go ahead.
What if we all went on strike?
Can we save the comments? I swear I'll stay all day if you like, but I'd like to get through
No.
all the slides.
You should just
And
let us
please,
all go.
Could I please get through it, and then I
We're
promise
wasting our
I'll take
time.
all objections and all questions at the
No,
end?
it's fine, continue.
Thank you, thank you. So can I get my issues addressed? The answer is yes, you can join, whatever your issues are in this workplace, you can get them addressed by joining a union. However, the issues you don't have can get addressed too. And please don't think at the end of the day that you're only going to end up with more. You may end up with more in one thing and trade away something else that you didn't want to trade away. The obligation is not that they reach an agreement. They can choose to agree. Sometimes when you ask for things, you have to pay for it with other things. That's how bargaining works. When you negotiate to buy a car, you pay for it. And the union does not bring anything to trade for it. They use your stuff in the collective bargaining process. So you might end up with more, you might end up with the same, you might end up with less, you might not end up with a contract, and that happens almost 50% of the time. After first contracts, a union wins, they bargain, and about half the time they don't get a contract. This is a true negotiation where neither side has to agree. And to get an agreement that's favorable to you, somebody has to bring something to the table.
Yeah.
So, union dues, are they mandatory? Anybody believe if the union gets a contract, you'll have to pay dues?
Yes, we will.
Not so fast. So, in order for a union to make it mandatory that you pay dues, they have to negotiate in a contract, what's
They
called
have to
a
have a
union
contract,
dues security clause. So the proposal is they go to whoever your attorney is negotiating a contract, and they say, we would like you to fire people who don't pay dues. We would like to make it a condition of employment that everyone who comes to work for NRT pays the union the fee that it says that they must pay, and if they refuse to, we want you to fire them.
It's,
And your employer isn't going to roll over and say, yes, the employer doesn't want to fire. They have enough time getting you, right? So they don't want to fire people because the union says so. And they generally say, no, I don't want to fire people because you say so. I don't even like you. Why would I want to fire my good people because they won't pay you? But the union needs that. That's how they make money. I don't blame them for that. That's how they make money. But to get that, they have to get the employer to agree to it. And you know how they get them to agree to it? They give the employer something off the employer's wish list. Right? So they kind of use your credit to buy them a car. So at the end of the day, most contracts I've seen have a union security clause, but the union has to trade and they have to get the employer to agree to it in language in a contract. And employers don't want to do that. If you end up with a contract, you will most likely, I've never seen a contract without it, have a dues checkoff clause. The union will not come around on payday, I need your 40, I need your 40, right? They're going to take it right out of your check. It's going to be on checked off, just like the government gets their money, right? And they do that because they get the employer through negotiations to agree to take your money out of your pay and send a union a check. Guess what? The employer's not going to want to do that. Why should I collect your money for you? You don't collect my money for me. But if you want me to collect your money, I want you to give me my proposal number 7. They're going to want something for it. That's how this works. And there are things that the union needs to run their business at NRT that do not lift up any of you. And they're going to negotiate it and they're going to use your stuff to get it. These things are in, look at any contract the union shows you. They'll show you contracts. You know, I had 105 contracts. If you came to my union hall, I'm showing you the best ones that I have, right? But if you looked at any contract I had, they had a dues checkoff clause and a union security clause, because that's how I make money. And I have to make everybody pay, or I want them terminated.
no, that's not why everybody pays dues. It's
Find
to
out.
keep it fair.
Find out that.
That's why Massachusetts is not a right to work state, because it's not fair. And when you are a right to work state, it's union busting, because you can just bring people in who aren't paying dues, And then,
So people that don't want to be part of this should be forced to pay dues at
yes,
the cost of their
because
job.
it
Let
keeps
me
it
ask you
fair.
something.
It's the same reason we all pay taxes, even though I don't like to
And
pay
if you don't pay your
taxes. I still
taxes, you
use the
don't lose your
public
job.
roads,
If you don't
gotta
pay-
pay taxes.
If you don't pay your cable bill, you don't lose your job. If you don't pay any bill you have, your electric, your mortgage, you don't lose your job. If you don't pay your dues, you lose your job.
Okay? Does
How's
anyone
that-
here have a
how's that-
problem paying
Is that
dues?
good? That's good for the, that's good?
No. Nobody cares if you pay
I'm gonna
dues. Stop
finish.
trying to scare us with the dues. The dues. So, it's just
You're
infuriating.
giving accurate
He said it was a
information.
factual.
Kayla, this is factual.
It
but
is
we're gonna
not.
step
It's
aside.
right in the book.
Truth.
It's right in the book.
I know it is, but you're
All right, so thank you.
being wily and crafty. And it's,
So let's say these two sides don't reach an agreement, right? And that's possible. There's no neutral party that's going to come and broker a deal between the employer and the union. And the law allows the employer to say no to any proposal the union makes. But the law does give both sides weapons. And if you get an agreement, or if the employer you feel is not bargaining an agreement that's to your satisfaction, there is action that you can take to try to force the company to do better. And I'm talking, of course, about going on strike. It's your weapon. If these sides do not reach an agreement, you have a protected right to go on strike. That means if you exercise this right, you can't be fired for going on strike. You have a protected right under this law to do it. And this used to be a good weapon for unions. Let me give you a little lesson about unions. Unions used to, you look at those good union contracts, and there's a lot of them out there. Most of them were negotiated, at least originally, pre-1980. And pre-1980, our parents were awesome, by the way. They had a social contract with workers that said, if you're exercising your rights and you're walking off the job to try to make a better life for yourself, we're going to support you. And people back pre-1980 would never dream of crossing a picket line. And when a union back then went on strike, it was very effective. It was a cannon pointed at employers. If you don't give us what we want, we're going to walk and we're going to put you out of business. And they did, because back then, no worker would cross a picket line, right? If they did, not a good idea for them. The general public wouldn't do business with somebody on strike. They didn't believe in ever crossing a picket line. So when an employer had a strike back then, they had a problem. They didn't have customers. They didn't have workers. And if they didn't want to go out of business, the only thing they could do was call the union and get a deal done. And it worked great. That one cannon pointed at employers worked great. And unions grew to 30+%. It was a wonderful thing. And people respected workers' rights back then.
and then Reagan happened.
Sorry?
I said, and then Reagan happened.
Then Reagan happened. We found something common ground. Ronald Reagan came, very anti-union president. He started firing public sector workers who went on strike. You can research the air traffic controllers. You older people remember that. And just attitudes about unions changed in this country. One of the political parties kind of went to war with unions. They're still at war with the unions.
Yeah.
They've almost made it fashionable to cross picket lines. And today, when there's a strike in the workplace, people cross picket lines. People go to work. The general public almost makes it a badge of honor to cross a picket line, some of a particular party.
Yeah.
And they
Fascists.
inadvertently, what's happened is now employers don't feel like there's a cannon pointed at them. And employers who want to push back and not agree to the contract can say no, and they're not afraid that they're going to go out of business. Because customers go in, workers cross picket lines, no judgment, half of you would come to work because you have bills to pay and you can't pay your own health care. And the reality is, I just don't feel that strong enough not to go to work. So employers generally no longer, that one weapon that works so well, today employers sometimes dare you to do it. They're not afraid they're going to go out of business because you go on strike. They don't want it. They'd like to avoid it, but it's not going to put them out of business. My question to you, and I'm sure one of you will ask me it anyway. The union says we have a right to vote for our contract, right? And if they tell you that, they don't have to, but if they tell you that, I trust them on that. Why would you ever vote for a contract where you're paying dues and getting the same or less, right? Why would you do that? Unions did a very smart thing. That threat of a strike doesn't scare employers,
Doesn't scare you guys?
but they scare workers generally. People don't want to go on strike. So when a union gives you, mark my words, when they give you a vote to vote in your contract, eventually this is what that vote will look like. And they'll give you, if it's a bad contract that you wouldn't want, you've got two bad choices to make. So if it's a good contract, you're going to vote yes and take the contract. But let's say it's the same or a little less. You now have to decide whether you're going to take a contract with the same or less, or walk off the job, risk not getting back in, risk getting replaced, because you can't get fired, but you can't get permanently replaced. There's a distinction under the law.
There is a bus
And
driver shortage,
you
though.
would have a right
Okay.
to not come to work under those circumstances. So the union has effectively
hard for me.
taken that cannon that used to be pointed at the employer, and they've cranked it around, and they now point it at you when you vote on a contract. Take this contract and you're going on strike. That's how they get bad contracts ratified. I only got like one more slide. Can I get through it?
Okay.
And I promise I'll address you. I just want to get there. So can I try this and change my mind? The law says yes, you can. The union will tell you yes, you can. I'm going to go with probably not. And here's why. The day you have a vote, let's say for sake of argument, you had your vote January 1st only because it's just easier on the calendar. And you voted for the union. The law says that if you no longer want a union, there is a process under the law to have another vote. And if you end up with something you don't like, you can do this all in reverse, in bizarrely. You can get 30% to sign a petition, you can go to the labor board, and you can ask the labor board for another election, and they'll give you another election with two exceptions. Those exceptions almost make it impossible. And here's the two exceptions. There's two bars under the law. The election protects the union for a year. So if you vote for the union is your exclusive representative for 1 year, for good or bad. And if 8 months from now you go to the labor board and say, we want to have another vote, the labor board will say no, because you have to wait a year. If you vote no for the union, in a year you can bring the union back, but you get one vote a year. So if you try to change your mind before that year is up, the labor board will not accept your petition and there will not be another vote. If the union ends up getting a contract, let's say they're bargaining for a year, and again, they'll bargain hard, they'll try hard to get you a good deal during that year, but let's say you're getting up near the end of the year and they're not doing too well. If the union agrees to a contract, let's say they agree to a contract right at that 1 year part. As soon as they agree to a contract or you vote to ratify a deal, you cannot vote them out for a 3-year period. There is a slight window toward the end of the 3rd year where you can file a petition to get rid of them for the next period of time, but the union is protected for 3 years. You cannot vote them out. They have a contract. It's called a contract bar. This rule under the law says we will give you up to 3 years. So a union who negotiates a bad contract that's 4 years long makes a mistake, because in the 4th year you can vote them out. So generally, if you read the papers, most contracts are 3 years long. Some are different, but more and more unions want 3-year deals because that protects them for the full length. So here's the strategy that the union is doing. During this campaign period, they're going to tell you how hard they're going to fight for you, and they will. They're not, like I said, they're not evil people. They'll try hard for you. During that 1 year they're protected, they're going to bargain hard. They're going to come to the table. They're going to pound the table. The employer can be just as ignorant and arrogant as them and say no to everything, and they battle back and forth. But once that year is up, the union's going to try to get a contract that it can, because it's been doing all this for free, and they want to get a return on their investment. So once that year happens, if you end up voting and you vote that contract and you say, geez, I can't not have a job, and yet not taking the contract, you are in for 3 years, and they get dues for 3 years, and you cannot vote them out during that period. And the strategy for the union, they get a 3-year deal, because at the end of 3 years, what happens? They get another 3 years and get another 3 years protection. And if they're good business people, as long as they're agreeing to 3-year contracts, you'll never vote them out. You'll never vote them out, and they'll have that income forever. So, a no vote in this thing is temporary. If you vote no, you can always vote next year. You can always have a vote to bring a union in here. The employer knows that, and it's a good thing that they do. Yes votes can be permanent. So if you want the union, vote yes. If you don't want them, vote no. If you're not sure what you want to do here, after all the information, and again, the union appreciate I say this, you should go to them and find out what they have to offer. At the end of the day, if the union agrees to the deal, you will be in most likely forever, as long as you're working for NRT. So here's my final message with that, and here's why I go through this exercise. Whether or not a union is good for you, again, stay out of all this rhetoric, because it's already happened. It's your business. You know, if you want the union, vote yes. If you don't want them, vote no. The threat of a union, I think, is good. Employers get mad at me when I say this. But there is only one good way to keep a union out of a workplace. And if they get through this, the only way, and my message to employers in this country, and I say it every chance I get, is if you don't want a union, it's easy to keep a union out. Treat your employees with dignity and respect, pay them fairly, and you'll never have a problem with a union. If they don't, whatever your issues are here, I don't even know what your issues are, whatever they are, if they don't get addressed, you always have an opportunity to do this again. If you do this, it's unlikely that you'll have an opportunity to vote them out. It can happen, but it's a very difficult process, and they play that contract bargain to keep you in. So one last thought before I take your questions. There are some units that have gone before you at NRT, right? There are a couple units that voted for the Teamsters. Most of them haven't, but a couple units that have. Why don't you wait and see how they make out? One of them is about 6 months in Westboro.
Over a year.
Okay, over a year. Framingham is now.
That's new, yeah.
Yeah, it's not new. That was in April, right? So if they make out well, if they get a contract where they raise their wages and benefits, do it, right? Do it.
We did.
If they don't, if they end up getting the same or less or paying dues, then you dodge the bullet. Why would you put yourself on the table and put your jobs at risk for gaining or losing when you have the opportunity to see how these other people do?
Can I clarify for a second? So I know you guys said they did, but that was not with NRT. So that was a first student union contract that was negotiated. That was not NRT.
Yeah, but
Framing
they
that.
got
Westboro right now is now in negotiations with NRT, and
And
that's
you-
why they're in status quo right now, and that's why things are getting negotiated. So please know that Westboro was not NRT, that was a first student.
Right, but it was.
Do you
a
understand what she
tentative
means by
agreement.
status quo?
It was a tentative agreement with First.
So
Student.
in status quo, the employer, once there's even a question in here, so you're in status quo now, whether or not you're represented by the union, the employer cannot make substantive changes. They cannot do anything out of the norm. They cannot give you an unscheduled wage increase, just like they can't give it to them in Framingham. If they wanted to, they can. They have to agree to a contract with the union before they can do that. So right now, anybody that has a union representing them, or even the question in the air, because there's a petition, if the employer wanted to address your wages and benefits, and I don't know if they do or if they don't, they couldn't by law, because it's considered a bribe. They can't take anything away either, because that's considered punitive action.
Right.
So the law makes the employer maintain the status quo. It's different than frozen. It's not frozen, but it can often have the same effect. They have to do what they've always done, right? Every year they have benefit enroll or whatever you do every year, they have to continue doing. If they give you a turkey at Thanksgiving, they have to give you a turkey. But they can't all of a sudden say, geez, inflation and everything else, and we have a problem here because of inflation. They can't do that in the other places because now they're represented by a union and they have to wait till that contract negotiation process takes place. So you are in status quo and you will be if the union wins. So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you're talking about holding off here and stuff and see how things go. Well, you mentioned the F-150. Well, let's say you have an old clunker, you come across the F-150, and you work out a contract, and with it you get a warranty, right? Because you don't want to buy a new car without a warranty. So take your choice. You finally find the truck that you like, you've done all the legwork, you've researched it, you get a warranty with it. Or do you wait a year and stay with the clunker and see how things continue to go with this clunker that you've already put a lot of time and investment in?
Boy, who's the clunker in this analogy?
And I'll call it for escort, you said. Alright, so do you keep the old car and hope for the best?
I guess
Have you
it,
been hoping for the best that because it's old? Or do you go with the new and hope the warranty covers everything you need? It
I
might not
don't know.
cover everything, because warranties aren't perfect.
I don't know, it
Good
depends on if you
analogy.
had the money to I guess if you had the money to take the risk and purchase the Escort, you can purchase the Escort if you have the will and,
Well, I
and the
don't
means to
purchase
pay
the
for it.
Escort, I'm getting rid of the
The analogy with the car buying is, are you buying an Escort?
No, I'm getting rid of the, I'm going
Good.
to buy the Ford. the
Good.
Yeah.
F-150.
Get rid of
So
the
I'd
Escort.
rather a 250 or 350.
You know, the analogy is, the deal to get done involves, the negotiation involves you having something to purchase the vehicle.
Right, but all the legwork's been done, so you're saying waiting.
What legwork has been done?
Payments done on all this stuff.
I mean, we have a perfect example with Framingham, and we have a perfect example with the other places where your employer's negotiating with them, and they haven't. They haven't gotten anything so far. And they may end up getting more. It may end up working out well. My only point with that is, you do have a unique opportunity to wait and see how that turns out.
Right, well,
And if it turns out better, there's nothing that would stand in the way of you. Nothing anybody could say that would change your mind into doing it.
we've looked at a list of all the different contracts in the area.
With NRT?
That Teamsters has negotiated with NRT, yes, and with First Student and others. And they're pretty consistently delivering for their constituents,
I would
so.
urge you to see how NRT performs. See how NRT performs.
Yeah,
Okay.
if it's any good,
Listen,
that's how they manage.
if you feel like you have nothing to lose here,
They said there's nothing they can do about our paying benefits, so.
right, especially now that you're in status quo. they can't.
Not that they were gonna give us
But-
any
but-
money.
I would
question.
suggest that maybe they can. I don't know. I don't know their
Go
situation.
ahead, Paul. after
But
you
listen,
go.
if you've got nothing to lose here, I'm not gonna, I don't wanna make enemies here. I like everybody here, I respect you all. If you've got nothing to lose, join the union. Join the union. I'm just saying that I've been there, I've been on both sides, and it is risky, and you might win, but you might lose, and it isn't up to the union. It is still up to NRT.
Right.
Paula, you had a question?
I was gonna make a point about this, when he said something about the strike, but he didn't let me talk when it
Go
was.
ahead, you can make it, I'll go back to the
Now it's
slide.
just like, but it's mute now, but you mentioned that a strike, that, most employers don't care about strikes anymore.
I didn't say that. I said they
What'd you
do
say?
care, but they're not afraid they're gonna go out of business. Strikes don't put companies on
Okay.
so much anymore.
Yeah, there's
In
different
this
things.
case, and I'm not saying anything that I'm advocating for a strike, but we're already short 15 drivers. So we could really hurt somebody if we did go on strike, just putting it out there.
I'd probably call the news.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So-
My experience with strikes are, companies are very adaptable today, and there are a lot of companies
They
out
can't
there.
hire anybody right now.
But-
Who would
So
wanna work here?
nobody wants to work here for them, but the money that they're making. They give us less pay and the other Marlboro drivers make more.
Crap
How is that fair?
benefits.
I will suggest to you that many employers have gone before you, and before giving into a union during a strike, employers will pay replacement workers, believe it
Where
or
are you gonna
not,
get
a
'em?
lot of money to.
Where are you gonna get it?
They can't even get drivers
Listen,
right
if you
now.
think that going on strike will bring them. to
No,
the knees,
I don't
then
even
you
want to
should
go
do
on
it.
strike,
I
but
know
if
you
it
do.
had to
I
get
know
to
you
that
do.
point, yeah.
So
I'm
I
just
guess,
saying that it would hurt.
and that's exactly my point. If the company and the union don't agree, there is nothing the union can do other than make you withhold your labor. That is their one and
That's our
only
bargaining
weapon.
chip.
And if you're
That's
not willing
our
to do
chip.
that, you're gonna take whatever contract
Not
they
the
cover.
union, it's
And listen,
us.
if you're all willing to do that, I'm seeing some heads shake no. If you're all willing to do that, you could probably bring them to their knees, or maybe they use their resources. So far, they haven't been afraid to take a strike, in my experience. They
And
haven't
one-
rolled
We'll
over
see.
and given the union
I haven't seen anything
anything at the
on
other
strike either.
places that I've seen. But
Maybe
maybe
if West
you guys
Berlin
are
on
different.
strike,
Listen, it's
yeah.
your business.
One more question, why so many meetings on the same thing?
Yeah, it's the same
It's
thing we
like,
had last week.
I live in Oxford, so I have to drive over 30 minutes to
First time
come here
I-
for meetings.
First time I've been here, I haven't made you come to any meetings, including this one. They asked me to come and give the education, and I'm happy to do it. I don't care what you end up doing, but listen, your employer has a position in this. They have a right to tell you what their position is and educate you on the process. The union likely had meetings to sign you up, and they certainly didn't invite the employer to those meetings, and they did those in secret, certainly. So your
Yeah,
employer
just
has
like
an
you don't invite
absolute
the union
right
to these.
to tell you their position in this. They pay you for it, they have to. And certainly, when you work for an employer, they have a right to have meetings as long as they're paying you for it. And they have an absolute right to educate you on the process. And this is all this has been.
Wow.
This has been it's been accurate under the law. If you catch me in a lie, go to the union, they can file a charge.
But
I'm
you
very
said-
confident that everything I tell you is factual under the law.
It
And
is.
forget factual, is fair. Is fair, representing the process.
Not everything is
Caleb,
fact.
hold on one second, so I might be able to answer that too. So you may not know this, but there are quite a few people who don't understand this process that Joe just went through. They just don't understand. They don't have anybody in the union. I've never had anybody in a family union. This is all a learning curve for me too. There's been a lot of people that have called me and emailed me anonymously. They don't want everybody to know who they are, that are still confused in the process and just wanted some clarification. So it's easier to just do it for everybody, to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Oh.
And everybody gets the same information in an open forum.
Okay.
Because last week I got an email at 7:41 a.m. for a meeting at 10 a.m. the same
So
day.
that's my fault.
What the
Again,
heck?
I dropped that ball. I thought that someone else had sent out an email, so I did not do that. That is on me. I take full blame. I should have done it the week before and I did not, so I apologize for that.
Can I add something?
Go ahead.
Just to let everybody know, I know that you're saying that not everybody got the info. Like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I got a lot of your phone numbers and emails. We've been having, drivers meetings on Zoom every week. Differs the day, but, you know, if you aren't getting the emails for them and you want to come to one, we talk about this stuff from basically our side of it all.
I didn't say
and-
that people didn't get that information. I said they're not understanding.
I know, I know, yeah.
Any other
They don't
questions on
know.
the information? Anybody back there have any?
I have a couple other questions. One, are you being paid to be here?
Of course I am. Are you being paid to be here? I don't do this for free. Nobody in
Yes.
this room does anything for free.
True. Well, I do some things for free. Second, are you familiar with the court case Brock versus Local 830? Can
Yeah.
you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Sure, when I was running for union office, people put out, because union campaigns, by the way, I'll tell you the story, and it'll be quick. Because this is an attempt for you to disparage me, because I know where you're going.
Oh, I'm just curious. I read about you on the internet.
Right, that's fine, and I'll
Famous.
discuss it. But anything you want to tell people about me, you're fine to do. When you go to vote in this election, if my name is on the ballot, don't vote for me. I'm an idiot, my wife will tell you that. I won't be on the ballot. You can't vote for me. You will never pay me a penny out of your paycheck. So this dialogue is intended to change that and get people angry at me,
I just
right?
wanted to mess with you.
I know, it's okay. And I like it. But at the end of the day, you're gonna vote whether or not the union is in your best interest, and they will take your money. I won't take your money. I'm never gonna get a penny of yours.
Right.
When this election is over, I'm leaving.
You got a penny of theirs, though. huh?
You're not gonna see me again. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
lots
go
of their
home,
money.
back to my family. And yeah, they pay me. They pay me enough to leave my family, to get on 2 planes, to come out here and stay in a crappy hotel and get hollered at and told that I'm.
And $137,000 last year.
Is that what I made?
For 6 months.
That's
says
actually
here on
not
this
true,
court filing.
but it's also not true.
Yeah.
And I'll leave that at that. That's a not true, accurate figure.
I got the
So-
court case right here.
So fill
My
us
court
in.
case with
Somebody
830 was
should.
because they claimed improperly that I stole something from the union. And it was,
Bribes from the employer.
and this lawsuit was me suing them, right? Who's the plaintiff on that?
You.
I'm the plaintiff suing them for lying about me to the members of my union.
Is
And
that
by the way, do you
copy
know
in?
how that turned out? Do you know how it turned out? You don't know because I was ordered to be, had a gag order on the outcome. So that ought to tell you how that turned out.
Sounds like you messed something
So
up
it
there.
was, I was the plaintiff, and maybe they had to give me money, I don't know, because they were lying. Unions sometimes lie too.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say they'll guarantee they won't take a contract with less money.
So you have a
But
little
my
bit of
experience is
animosity
that they
against the
do.
union? Is that
Any
why
other
you don't like
questions?
unions?
Not about me? Because you can't vote for me? More than
Probably
137?
more than him. Yeah,
Well, that's
I
more
mean-
relevant than what I make, because they're gonna get your
so,
money. What the union makes is relevant. How
yeah,
they spend your dues money is relevant.
I mean, yeah, they lobby.
What
for
I make
us.
is irrelevant, because none of it will be yours.
I mean, they have to have some money to, do what they do.
We'll
So-
show you how they spend their money.
Yeah, I saw graphs
You
and
see their
charts about
LMs?
how, yeah, see how they
Do
spend their
pretty
money.
good.
I'm
Many-
okay with it.
Especially at the international level, many millions and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, lobbying for good laws like the PRO Act and the No Tax Breaks for Union Busting Act, which are great.
Which
And
so
these
far
won't
haven't
happen
done,
anymore.
worn out anything. So.
Huh?
And you can call this union busting, I would say that
It is
you've
union
been
busting.
fair with the information.
It's union busting.
Any further questions? Not about me.
All right.
Thank you for your time, good luck to you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.